In GrimGrimoire, you play as Lilith Blonde, a magician in training. On her 5th day at a prestigious magic academy, the entire faculty and student body are killed by a demon and the ghost of an archmage. But just before Lilith is killed, she's sucked back in time to the beginning of the week and must find a way to stop this catastrophe from coming to pass. GrimGrimoire is a member of a very small, and often terrible subgenre, console real-time strategy. Console real-time strategies are usually defined as being bare bones in mechanics and notable lack of keyboard and mouse control. GrimGrimoire's controls are initially pretty confusing. They work adequately once you understand them, but they do feel lacking in a lot of aspects, especially accuracy and features. For instance, you don't have control groups. You can't hotkey your group of fairies so you can keep track of them at all times. If you have to go back to manage something at base, navigating the map takes forever, even if you use the right thumbstick, which scrolls the map faster, and you're zoomed out all the way. Then after doing whatever you needed to do back at base, you have to go back, find your little group of fairies, and hope you didn't misplace one and continue onwards. This applies to selecting multiple types of units. You simply can't. You can only control one group of one type of unit at a time. These flaws reinforce a style of play that will be discussed a little bit later. Most real-time strategy games are effectively 2D, in that they're on the XZ axis, more commonly known as a top-down viewpoint. GrimGrimoire is on the XY axis, just like a traditional platforming game like Super Mario Bros. The battlefield is divided into floors. This means for ground units to change a level, they need to go up a staircase. This immediately makes any kind of flying unit significantly more useful, as they can go directly to their destination instead of having to find a staircase before proceeding onwards. Whereas other real-time strategy games would divide units into factions, GrimGrimoire doesn't. There are kind of factions in the traditional sense with your magical masteries, but you can build whatever you want. If you want to focus on necromancy, you can, but you can also complement it with units from other magical subsets like alchemy or glamour with no penalty. There are some interesting aspects of this. The workers for the different types behave slightly differently. It may be worthwhile to get ghosts, the necromancy workers, simply because they can fly, and it makes harvesting certain mana crystals a lot faster. Then you can completely ignore the skill tree and focus on something else for your army. There are also units that are astral and substance. These attributes basically define what they can be damaged by. Certain units simply won't be able to damage astral units without use of support magic, like the homunculus's flare. GrimGrimoire is a game of light counters. The various professors tell you the strengths of their type. Alchemy is strong against glamour, but it's weak to sorcery. Necromancy is strong against sorcery, but that is weak to glamour, so you have this little circle. It's a nice idea that just doesn't play out that well. Sorcery has by far the most useful set of minions with demons and dragons, whereas everything else is just kind of lackluster and too niche to work effectively in the context of GrimGrimoire. Real-time strategy games are best enjoyed against other players. GrimGrimoire is a strictly single-player campaign. There's no option for any kind of cooperative or competitive play, which is extremely unfortunate. You'll be forced to play against the AI, and it has some serious flaws. GrimGrimoire's graphics are done by Vanillaware. If you're a fan of Vanillaware's other works like Dragon's Crown and Odin's Sphere, there's a lot to like here. The art is extremely detailed and well done. The character designs are all fun and interesting. The army units all look interesting and cool as well. They also have nice animations, but it's often hard to see them as the map topography and other units stacking on each other gets in the way. In fairly typical RTS fashion, your units all have little sound bites associated with movement and attacking. In GrimGrimoire, they are more annoying than you'd like. You'll be constantly hearing the same few sound bites.
I'm here. You want something? Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. You want something? Okay, fine.
Most RTSs would give you a handful per unit to spice things up. In GrimGrimoire, you have maybe 2 per unit if you're lucky. The soundtrack works, but it often feels underwhelming and quite repetitive as you'll be hearing the same few tracks over and over again.
Okay. You want something?
One of the worst aspects of GrimGrimoire is that it does not convey information to you well. The information you get from the HUD is just not relevant. Things like damage numbers, what units can attack astral, what can attack substance, what can fly, these are all things that are just absent from the HUD. This extends to things like upgrades. You'll need to pause and reference the in-game documentation to see what upgrades do. Demons get an upgrade called Black Curse, but it doesn't ever tell you what it does. You have to go and reference it yourself. It turns out it adds a damage over time effect to demons' attacks, but you'd have no way of knowing that from any information given to you in a battle. This lack of conveying necessary information leads to a lot of trial and error that could be easily avoided by simply having some numbers or more robust tooltips on the UI. GrimGrimoire's story involves a time loop, which makes it a little bit more interesting. Lilith starts off as a total novice, and as you progress through a few loops, the characters involved do take note of her seemingly instantaneous improvements. There is a small aspect of mystery here, but it's revealed pretty quickly how and why the events occurred. Lilith still needs to figure out how to save everyone in the 5 days, and it takes her several cycles to do so. This has logical progression, and she starts to understand what events will happen and plans accordingly. It's not exactly new or unique, but if done well, it's usually a fun concept, and it does work here. Unfortunately, the cutscenes and dialogue are handled by two fairly stoic characters talking on a flat background. It's usually boring, and GrimGrimoire's delivery isn't an exception. The characters themselves look great, but pure dialogue and characters without animations standing around is just not a good way to deliver it. The story is fun, but to trudge through long RTS battles and boring stoic dialogue delivery to experience it is just not enjoyable. Real-time strategy AI is always a sore spot. It usually comes down to two factors. The AI is either really dumb and too easy, or it simply cheats. In GrimGrimoire, it definitely cheats. Cheating being that the rules that apply to you simply don't apply to the AI. Things like production speeds, resource gathering rates, population caps. The AI gets a strict advantage to make up for its inferior decision making. The AI will amass armies faster than you could ever hope to, and the enemy doesn't need to deal with economy and resource gathering. It makes every single battle really anti-fun. You're constantly forced to play from behind and work your way uphill. Controlling your units is way more complex and way more tedious than it should be. Responsiveness is just another thing that's just lacking. If you need to quickly move your units away from a turret or another unit that's just gonna slaughter them, they simply don't respond with any sense of urgency. They'll mosey along, right into Dragon Breath, and die. Controlling multiple units is a pain, and that's if they're the same type. It's impossible to command multiple different units at once. This control flaw is really unfortunate because strategies immediately emerge that involve spamming one type of unit, and it's almost always the most effective solution rather than attempting to make a diverse army. Fairly early in the game, you get access to dragons. Dragons are easily the best unit in the game. They're the most durable unit, they deal area of effect damage, and they are extremely cost and supply efficient. They are so good that they can bypass any soft counters that the game has. The issue is that a single 6 supply, 500 mana dragon will destroy a ton more than 6 supply worth of fairies, or demons, or ghost knights, or anything else you can throw at it. In conjunction with incredibly small population caps, this means you're often just having some workers, a handful of turrets, and 4 or 5 dragons for every single battle. All these problems compound together, which is really annoying because there's a decent RTS under here. All the components for a good one exist. There are artillery units, basic fighters, troop carriers, there's caster units. Everything is really clunky to use in the context of GrimGrimoire, so it makes it easier to just spam dragons. Every single mission usually devolves into make workers, make some cannons to defend, wait until you get dragons out. If you move out too early, you're subjected to extremely powerful counterattacks. If you wait and play passively, the enemy doesn't seem to bother with you that much, and a few cannons are enough of a deterrent to keep them from attacking you. It's sad because what GrimGrimoire ends up being is a watered down console RTS with one viable strategy, and all the others are too much effort to bother with as they simply aren't better. GrimGrimoire has 3 difficulty settings: normal, easy, and sweet, which is very easy. The most notable feature of the easier difficulties is that you simply gather resources much faster, you have more starting units, enemy numbers and aggressiveness is reduced, and they seem to deal less damage overall. GrimGrimoire isn't a deep real-time strategy, or a particularly hard one, even on normal difficulty. Avoiding all optional content, GrimGrimoire was completed in 10 hours, 13 minutes, and 42 seconds. The battles themselves just take a really long time. To reiterate, the control scheme is not good, and as a direct result of it, GrimGrimoire constantly pauses so you can do things that would be easily done in real time in any other real-time strategy game. This slows the pace of battles to an absolute crawl. It stalls everything. It stalls your mana gathering for your economy, it stalls building your army, and it stalls your dragon's death march to the enemy stronghold. The maps are frequently too large. With the addition of requiring stairs for most units to go up and down, it turns battles into these really long marathons. You may have missed a single building, and using slow dragons or non-flying units to find it is an atrocious experience. Unfortunately, due to the nature of being a real-time strategy game, GrimGrimoire has a lot of missions. Nothing changes. Rarely do you need to do something besides defeat all enemies or defend for 30 minutes, which makes every mission feel the same. There are a few challenge missions to supplement the main game. They're simply not worth the time. GrimGrimoire is an unfortunate case and should be used as a cautionary tale. There is a decent game here. It has all the necessary components to be a unique, charming, enjoyable real-time strategy game. The entire concept of a 2D console RTS that's strictly single player just kinda doomed it from the very start. The lack of a control scheme conducive to the genre makes it a pain to play. The default control scheme is probably as good as they could have made it. Unfortunately, just because it functions doesn't mean it's acceptable. The UI and HUD just does not convey the necessary information that you need. The idea of soft counters and different types of units to play with is rendered obsolete by some extremely powerful units you get very early on, and that renders all new units and strategies obsolete before you even get a chance to unlock them. The artwork is beautiful in typical Vanillaware fashion. The story is interesting and fun, but the delivery of it is dry and it's sandwiched between these monotonous, meat grinder console RTS battles against cheating AI. That's not to say that it's hard to best this cheating AI, it's just not fun or satisfying to play and beat GrimGrimoire. GrimGrimoire gets recommended playing's most disgraceful verdict of not recommended.
Miss, surely you don't expect to make it out alive, do you?
Of course I do.
And don't call me Shirley.